When a man is deeply in love but hasn't yet realized it, you will see it, not in what he says, but in what he does when he thinks no one is watching. Love is rarely confessed with clarity at first. It unfolds in behaviors, in little gestures that reveal more than words ever could. A man may not have the vocabulary to explain what he feels, or perhaps he hasn't even admitted it to himself, but his actions betray the truth buried within his heart. He will make time when he's busy. He will pay attention when you think he isn't. He will remember the details of things you barely mention. These are not random acts. They are signs of emotional investment. He doesn't need to say, "I love you" every day for it to be true. You will know by the way he adjusts his life around your presence, even when he doesn't talk about it. A man who's falling for you in ways he can't articulate will start to shift his schedule just to align with yours. He'll start thinking of your needs before his own, and he may not even understand why he's doing it. It's because love, real love, operates on a subconscious level before it ever becomes conscious. His priorities begin to change slowly, and he may not even notice it at first. Suddenly, your happiness starts to matter more. He starts to want your opinion on decisions, not because he needs approval, but because your thoughts are becoming part of his world. He might not say, "I miss you," but he'll call without a reason. He might not say, "I care about your well-being," but he'll remind you to eat or text you to check if you got home safely. He might not say, "I'm afraid to lose you," but when you pull away, he feels it. Deeply, quietly, and does things to draw you back in, even if it's subtle. His concern, his interest, his presence, they're all signs. You don't have to search for romantic speeches when his energy, his body language, and his daily habits scream louder than his words ever could. This is where so many people make a mistake. They wait for verbal affirmation while ignoring behavioral confirmation. But words are easy. They can be spoken without conviction. Behavior, however, is where truth resides. Love doesn't hide in poetry or flowers alone. It lives in moments like when he chooses to show up for you, listen to you, defend you, or protect your peace. Especially when he doesn't have to, and he might be confused by his own behavior. He may not even know why he cares so much, why he's affected by your silence, why he notices when something's wrong. That's because he's feeling something deeper than he's used to, and it's catching him off guard. His rational mind hasn't caught up with his emotional truth. Many men are taught to suppress their feelings, to maintain control, to never appear vulnerable. So when they begin to feel love on a level that's unfamiliar, so powerful that it threatens their sense of emotional independence, they instinctively resist it. But resistance doesn't cancel love. It amplifies it. The more he tries to keep his feelings under wraps, the more his actions start leaking them out. And the more he tries to maintain distance, the more drawn he becomes to the one person who makes him feel something he can't define. This is not manipulation. This is human psychology. This is emotional growth. A man can be in love and not know it, but the woman he's falling for will feel it if she's paying attention. Not to what he says, but to how he treats her. You notice it in the way he listens when you speak, even if the topic is something he's never cared about before. You'll see it in the way he tries to fix what bothers you, in the way he studies your likes and dislikes. When a man starts to love you more than he realizes, he shifts into protector mode, not in a possessive way, but in a silent, consistent way. He becomes interested in your world. He asks about your goals. He becomes irritated when something hurts you, even if he tries to hide it. When you're sick, he doesn't just say, "Get better." He checks in, follows up, offers help. When you're quiet, he asks what's wrong. These small moments are giant clues. He may not say he's falling, but he is. And then there's presence. A man who is emotionally indifferent won't be available. He won't invest time. He won't try to understand your silence. But when he's more in love than he knows, he's there. Not always perfectly, but genuinely. He may stumble in expressing it, but he shows up. He supports your dreams, even if they don't benefit him. He becomes loyal in a way that feels effortless. And he starts to prioritize emotional safety for you, whether he's conscious of it or not. His gestures evolve from attraction to devotion. His focus shifts from physical to emotional. You'll notice how he goes out of his way to not disappoint you, how your opinions begin to shape his decisions. All of this, and still, he may never say the words right away, but you don't need him to, not if you're watching what he does. His love isn't hiding, it's speaking a language louder than sound. There's something deeply misunderstood about emotional resistance, especially in men who are quietly falling in love. The truth is, when a man feels a powerful emotional connection, one that touches parts of himself he hasn't yet faced, he doesn't always run toward it. Sometimes he pulls away. Not because he doesn't feel anything, but because he feels too much. Emotional resistance is not a sign of disinterest. More often than not, it's a sign of internal conflict. And here's the paradox. The deeper the feelings, the stronger the resistance. He might even convince himself he's not in love, yet every cell in his body betrays that denial. That's because desire, when it runs deep enough, disturbs the comfort of control. And most people, especially men who have spent years mastering emotional detachment, fear losing that control. When a man is drawn to you in ways he can't explain, it stirs things in him: vulnerability, uncertainty, hope, fear. And these are not easy to process. So what does he do? He resists. He becomes distant. He pulls back. He might even say things like, "I'm not ready," or "I don't know what I want." And if you take that at face value, you might assume the feelings aren't mutual. But what's really happening is an emotional storm beneath the surface. It's not that he doesn't feel, it's that he feels so deeply, he's afraid of what those feelings could do to the life he's carefully built. And instead of diving in, he starts questioning everything. That resistance is a protective mechanism, a way of guarding himself from surrendering to something he can't fully understand. Sometimes emotional resistance is born from past pain. A man who once gave everything and was left broken learns to mistrust intensity. He learns to associate vulnerability with loss. So when he starts falling again, this time deeper than before, he subconsciously fights it. He builds walls, not because he wants to keep you out, but because he's terrified of being hurt again. He's not resisting you, he's resisting the unknown. He's resisting the power you now have over him. And the more he cares, the more he fears that power. This is the quiet battle of a man who is more in love than he knows. He might even create distance to test the bond, to see if you'll chase or stay grounded, to see if the connection will survive his fear. He doesn't say this aloud, but his actions reveal it. You'll see it in the moments when he acts confused, when he gets close then cold, when he shows signs of affection and then retreats into silence. This push-pull behavior isn't manipulation. It's emotional self-preservation. The human heart, when exposed too quickly, seeks cover. But feelings don't disappear just because they're not spoken. In fact, they grow louder in silence. The man who resists you emotionally is often the one who thinks of you constantly. He's the one who replays conversations in his mind, who wonders what you're thinking, who feels your absence more than he's willing to admit. But to him, admitting that would be admitting that he's vulnerable. And for some men, vulnerability feels like weakness, not because they don't trust you, but because they were never taught how to trust their own hearts. The mind will build 1,000 arguments against love. It will say, you don't know her well enough. You've been hurt before. You're not ready. She could leave too. And when those thoughts take over, resistance sets in like armor. He becomes colder, quieter, harder to reach. But that armor doesn't mean his heart isn't beating for you. In fact, the need for armor is proof that something powerful is happening inside him. You are shaking his emotional foundation. You are disrupting his emotional routine. He may not know how to express it, but his resistance is really a sign of internal chaos. The kind of chaos love creates when it starts to break through emotional walls. This is why patience is often misunderstood in relationships. It's not about waiting endlessly. It's about understanding what's really going on beneath someone's behavior. A man who resists isn't always a man who wants to leave. Sometimes he just needs to confront the fact that love is demanding more from him than he's used to giving. And love that demands more will always cause friction. It will push against his self-belief. It will challenge his habits. It will ask him to rise above his limitations. And that's uncomfortable. So he hesitates. He overthinks. He doubts. But the emotion doesn't die. It deepens. It grows, and with time, the resistance begins to crack, because no one can fight truth forever. When someone is emotionally resisting you, it's important not to take it personally. This is where your own emotional strength matters. Because if you internalize the resistance as rejection, you might start doubting yourself, questioning your worth, or trying to prove something. That only adds pressure to the dynamic. Instead, recognize that emotional resistance is more about them than it is about you. They are facing themselves, not just you. They are confronting feelings they didn't expect. And that confrontation is uncomfortable. But in that discomfort, a new version of them is emerging. One that has to choose between fear and love, between protection and connection, between hiding and opening up. And that choice, while silent, is the very evidence that he's more in love with you than he knows. There's a quiet power in the way a man becomes attentive to the details of your life when he's emotionally connected, even if he hasn't realized how deep his feelings truly go. He may not declare his love openly or understand the depth of it yet, but his attentiveness says more than his lips ever could. When a man is falling for you in a way that surprises even him, he starts to tune into things others overlooked. He'll remember how you take your coffee. He'll notice when your tone changes slightly over text. He'll sense when something is off, even if you haven't said a word. This attentiveness doesn't come from a place of obligation. It flows from a deep emotional curiosity, a silent magnetism that makes him want to understand you on a deeper level. He's not trying to impress you. He's compelled by a force inside him to notice you, all of you, the way you move, the things that make you smile, the things that make you pause. He wants to learn the unspoken language of your emotions because whether he knows it or not, his heart is already invested. This kind of attentiveness isn't something you can fake, and it's not something casual people offer. Casual people listen to respond. A man who's truly falling listens to understand. He starts to track your moods, not because he's keeping score, but because he's learning to care at a subconscious level. It matters to him when something matters to you, even if it has no direct relevance to his own life. That's not politeness. That's emotional presence. You might not even notice it first. You'll just feel a strange sense of being seen, deeply and without effort. He'll remember the story you told weeks ago that you had forgotten you even shared. He'll ask follow-up questions about something small, like the meeting you were nervous about or the friend you were worried over. These aren't rehearsed behaviors. These are organic patterns that start showing up when his heart has made a silent agreement to care more than his mind can currently process. He doesn't have a strategy, he just finds himself invested. He wants to be someone who contributes to your peace. He doesn't want to fix you or control you. He simply wants to be there in the small, invisible ways that make your life a little easier, a little more understood. This attentiveness becomes even more noticeable when he begins to anticipate your needs before you voice them. Maybe he brings you something you mentioned in passing. Maybe he senses when you need space, and without drama or confusion, he gives it to you without making you feel guilty. Maybe he knows when to call and when to wait. He's learning your emotional rhythms. This isn't about manipulation, it's about intuition that's becoming sharpened by emotional connection. His mind is beginning to orbit around your world, not because he's obsessed, but because love, even unspoken love, naturally gravitates toward deeper understanding. People think love is about big moments, confessions, gifts, surprises, but those are surface expressions. The core of real love is found in the small acts of awareness. It's in the way he notices when you're overstimulated in a crowded room and gently steers the conversation to something that grounds you. It's in the way he picks up on what makes you feel safe and repeats those behaviors even without being asked. These aren't grand gestures, but they speak volumes. They reveal the growth of a bond that's being built without words, brick by brick, observation by observation. The beauty is that he might not even know he's doing it. It just feels natural, automatic, like breathing. The attentiveness of this kind is also revealed in how he responds to your silence. If you're quiet, he doesn't ignore it or get defensive. He leans in gently without pressure. He respects your emotional space while still holding the door open for connection. This subtle balance is rare, and it doesn't come from a playbook. It comes from emotional sensitivity that deepens as his feelings deepen. He becomes invested in your inner world. He wants to protect it, understand it, and navigate it with care. This is what makes his presence different. He's not just showing up. He's showing up tuned in. It doesn't stop at emotional cues either. He begins to notice your patterns, your habits, your stress triggers, even the energy shifts in your voice. He'll know when your laughter is genuine and when it's masking something. He'll be able to tell when you're pushing yourself too hard, and without shaming you, he might gently challenge you to rest. This is someone who is emotionally connected, someone whose soul is inching closer to yours in ways even he might not fully understand yet. This attentiveness becomes a mirror of his emotions. The more in tune he becomes with you, the more apparent it is that he's feeling something deeper, something rare, something he hasn't named yet, but lives through. And it's not just emotional attentiveness, it extends to the physical realm too. He will become acutely aware of how your energy shifts in his presence. He'll adjust his behavior not to impress, but to create harmony. Maybe he changes the music when you're anxious. Maybe he slows his speech when he notices you're overwhelmed. These aren't things you'll have to ask for. They'll just start happening. His nervous system is aligning with yours. That's not coincidence. That's chemistry. Emotional and physiological, moving in sync. That kind of attentiveness isn't performative. It's love speaking through the language of awareness. It's the quiet echo of a heart speaking long before the mouth ever does. There's a fascinating contradiction in the behavior of a man who is deeply falling in love, yet unaware of the depth of his feelings. He may begin to feel overwhelmed by emotions he doesn't fully understand, and as a result, he pulls back. To the untrained eye, this might seem like disinterest or emotional distance, but in reality, it's a protective reflex, a psychological defense mechanism that kicks in when his internal world becomes too complex to navigate with logic. You see, love, true, deep emotional attachment, is not always a gentle process. For some, especially those who are not accustomed to vulnerability, it feels like chaos. It disrupts the order they've built, challenges their sense of control, and begins to stir feelings they haven't learned to process. So what happens? He steps back. Not because he doesn't care, but because he cares more than he can admit, even to himself. That emotional withdrawal is often misunderstood. It looks like mixed signals. It feels like rejection, but if you look deeper, there's something more intricate happening. When a man starts to feel emotionally invested, his brain and heart begin to battle each other. One part of him wants to lean in, to be close, to surrender to the gravity pulling him toward you. But the other part, shaped by past wounds, fear of vulnerability, or fear of losing his identity, resists. That resistance isn't about you. It's about the unfamiliar terrain he finds himself standing on. He may not have the tools to express what he's feeling. He might not have ever learned how to be emotionally transparent. So instead of leaning in, he pulls away. Not to detach, but to recalibrate. This is the kind of behavior that makes many people give up. They take it personally, they chase, they confront. But the truth is, when you understand what's really going on, you'll realize he's in a psychological process of trying to make sense of how important you've become. He's asking himself questions he doesn't have answers for. Why do I think about her when I wake up? Why do I care how she feels? Why do I feel nervous when she doesn't reply quickly? Why does her opinion matter to me more than others? These questions don't come with neat answers. They come with confusion, self-reflection, and often a momentary emotional shutdown. He retreats to sort through what he's experiencing, not because he's unsure about you, but because he's unsure about what's happening within him. So you'll notice that when he pulls back, it's not complete detachment. He won't cut you off entirely. He may become less responsive, more distant, but not absent. He's still there, orbiting, watching, listening, engaging just enough to keep the thread of connection alive. That thread is the tether between his heart and the comfort zone he's afraid to leave. Deep down, he knows you've impacted him, but admitting that impact means facing change. And change, even when it's good, is terrifying when your emotional world has been tightly controlled. This temporary retreat is often a test, not of your value, but of his readiness. He's testing the waters of emotional vulnerability and watching how he feels in the space between connection and solitude. He wants to know if the pull toward you is emotional dependence or something deeper. Here's what many people miss. That emotional retreat is not regression. It's growth in disguise. It's the cocoon phase. A man who is overwhelmed by love has to rewire part of his thinking. He has been operating from self-preservation, from logic, from independence. Love throws all that into the fire. It exposes how deeply he longs for connection, for safety, for trust. And because he can't express it with words, his actions look erratic. He might be affectionate one day and cold the next. Not because he's playing games, but because he's navigating internal turbulence. His soul is waking up to the reality that he's no longer in control of how he feels about you. And that awakening is not graceful, it's often clumsy, even painful. During this stage, you may also notice he's more sensitive to your actions. He may interpret things you say in ways you didn't intend. He may seem more reactive, more defensive, or more emotionally volatile. That's not you triggering him. It's his heart revealing where healing is needed. You've touched a part of him that he thought was protected. And now that it's exposed, he's unsure how to handle it. He may even try to downplay what he feels, acting indifferent, making offhand remarks, pretending he's fine. But underneath that mask, there's a storm of feelings he hasn't given himself permission to admit. He's not running from you. He's running from what you bring out of him. Vulnerability, authenticity, emotional exposure, all things that scare someone who's not used to being emotionally naked. This pulling away, if not interpreted correctly, becomes the end of many potential connections. But if you understand it, you'll see it as part of the process, a necessary step in his journey to recognizing and accepting his love for you. He must feel the absence, the space, the contrast between life with your energy and life without it. Only then does the truth settle in that what he feels isn't just affection or attraction, it's something much deeper, something he can't ignore. And the moment he realizes that pulling away doesn't quiet the noise inside, but amplifies it, that's when the real shift begins. Not because he was convinced or coerced, but because he finally saw the evidence of his own heart. When a man is falling deeper in love with you than he realizes, one of the most telling signs is his sudden, almost subconscious urge to protect you. This isn't always the overt Hollywood-style heroism you might expect. It's often much quieter, more subtle, and more profound. It's a shift in how he responds to your vulnerabilities, your presence, and even your silences. It's how he begins to notice the things that trouble you before you even speak them aloud. His instincts become tuned in to your energy, to your emotional state, to the small details that most people overlook. It's not something he plans or consciously decides. It's a natural outcome of his emotional connection deepening beyond the surface. This protective instinct manifests in many forms. He may start to become more aware of your surroundings when you're out together, keeping an eye out as you cross the street, guiding you through a crowd, or making sure you're seated comfortably. He doesn't do it to impress you. He does it because in his mind you are precious. And anything that threatens your peace, no matter how small, starts to feel like a threat to him too. His desire to protect isn't just physical, though. It extends emotionally and spiritually. He may begin to shield you from negativity, taking a stand for you in conversations, or distancing you from people or situations that don't serve your well-being. Even if he's not ready to admit how much he feels, he becomes your quiet guardian, silently carrying the weight of your emotional safety. When a man feels this way, he also becomes highly sensitive to your pain. He notices when your voice changes, when you're withdrawn, or when something's off, even if you haven't said a word. His protective nature pushes him to ask questions, to probe gently, to try to understand what's troubling you. He might not always know how to help, and he might not always say the right thing, but the effort is always there. That effort comes from a place he may not be able to articulate. It's not about being your savior. It's about an emotional compulsion to see you whole, safe, and at peace. He might get frustrated when he can't fix your problems, not because he thinks you're helpless, but because his emotional attachment is starting to make your struggles feel like his own. That's the depth of emotional merging that happens when love quietly takes hold. You'll see this protective behavior most clearly when someone else disrespects you. A man who is emotionally entangled with you, even if he hasn't verbalized it, will find himself instantly reactive when he senses someone crossing a boundary with you. He may not explode or confront, but you'll see the tension in his body, the way he shifts closer to you, or the sharpness in his tone when he addresses the situation. He reflex. His internal emotional system activates the moment he feels you're under threat. And again, it may not always be dramatic. Sometimes it's as small as correcting someone who misrepresents you, defending your character, or reinforcing your worth in conversations. He's not doing it for recognition. He's doing it because something within him has decided that you matter more than his own comfort. Another sign of this protective urge is his desire to guide you gently. He may begin to offer advice more often, not in a controlling way, but in a way that's rooted in care. He wants to see you make the best choices, not because he doubts your judgment, but because your success, your peace, and your growth have become important to him. You are no longer just someone he enjoys spending time with. You are someone whose life trajectory he has emotionally invested in. That's not something he advertises. In fact, it may confuse him. He might catch himself giving you advice on topics he usually wouldn't engage in, or checking up on your well-being more often than he does with others. That's the unconscious pull of love in motion. It shifts his priorities. It rewrites the blueprint of what he thought a connection should be. When a man feels protective of a woman he hasn't fully admitted he's in love with, there's also a sense of responsibility that begins to grow. You'll see him thinking ahead, planning things that make your life easier, whether it's offering to drive, to help with a task, to support you in something stressful, or simply to show up when he says he will. Those acts are his way of building a safety net around you. In his mind, even if he can't give you everything, he can at least make sure you feel supported. And that quiet support is where his love speaks the loudest. Words may still be hard to come by, but action becomes his language. This kind of protective love also makes him more attentive to your boundaries. A man who is growing into a deeper emotional connection starts to respect your space more. He becomes more sensitive to your need for rest, for emotional distance, for time alone. That's because protection isn't just about shielding from danger. It's also about preserving your energy, your identity, your emotional state. He doesn't want to overwhelm you or cause any stress. In fact, if he senses that he's the reason you're feeling off, he will reflect, he'll retreat momentarily, and he'll try to correct it. He holds himself accountable, not because he feels obligated, but because your comfort has become personal to him. Perhaps the most moving form of protection is when he starts to change how he speaks around you. He becomes more intentional with his words, more careful with his tone. He avoids sarcasm that might hurt you, chooses affirming language, and watches your reactions to ensure you feel safe in conversation. You'll notice he begins to listen more. He doesn't just hear you, he absorbs what you say, remembers the little things, and brings them up later. Attentiveness is part of how he protects you emotionally. It's how he builds an environment where your spirit can rest, even if he hasn't fully acknowledged to himself that what he's feeling is love. There is a deeply revealing truth about human connection. When someone begins to fall in love, truly fall, their actions often speak volumes before their own mind catches up. One of the most overlooked but powerful signs that a man is more in love with you than he realizes is how often and how freely he opens up to you emotionally. It's in the moments he shares his fears without intending to, or when he tells you stories from his past that he hasn't told anyone else, even his closest friends. This type of vulnerability isn't casual. For a man, especially one who has been taught to guard his emotions, this openness doesn't come easy. It is not rehearsed, not curated. It flows out in conversations when he least expects it, when his guard is down, and when your presence feels safe enough to let him breathe without a mask. He may not even be aware of how deeply he's sharing. He might brush it off as just talking, just venting, just thinking out loud. But if you pay close attention, you'll see that he's not just giving you information, he's giving you access. Access to his mind, access to his past, access to his emotional world. And for many men, this is sacred territory. The very act of being emotionally transparent with someone, especially consistently and without fear of judgment, signals that his subconscious has already formed a powerful bond. A man doesn't open those internal doors unless he feels safe, unless he trusts not only your presence, but your essence. And often, he doesn't even know why he's doing it. That's what makes this sign so revealing. He may start telling you about a family member who hurt him, or an insecurity that still lingers in his adult life, or a failure that still stings. And he may not package it as a big revelation. It might come out casually over coffee while driving or in the silence between other subjects. But the vulnerability is there, unmistakable. That is not small talk. That is emotional intimacy taking root in the soul before the mind has named it. He is building something with you, whether he realizes it or not. What's even more telling is how often he turns to you in times of stress, when life starts pressing on him, when work becomes overwhelming, or when something goes wrong. He doesn't shut down or disappear. He reaches out. He doesn't just want your presence, he seeks your perspective. Your voice becomes grounding. He wants to hear what you think, even if he doesn't always agree. You become a sounding board for his internal storms, and whether he admits it or not is because he trusts your insight on a level he hasn't given to many others. You hold space for his emotions in a way that feels both comforting and rare. That's when you'll see the depth of emotional reliance forming. And that reliance is often love in its quietest, purest form. This emotional transparency also shows in how he begins to express his fears around the relationship itself. He might casually mention that he's not used to opening up this way, or that he's scared of being hurt. He might test the waters by sharing a small emotional truth and watching how you respond. He's trying to see if you'll mock it, dismiss it, or worse, use it against him. When you respond with patience and care, he lets down another layer of defense. Slowly, he gives you more. He gives you the pieces of himself he used to keep in the dark. And this isn't about weakness. It's the exact opposite. Emotional openness is strength. And it's the type of strength that comes only when the soul begins to recognize something it doesn't yet have words for. Connection, safety, love. Another subtle signal appears in how he starts to reflect on things after your conversations. You might say something about emotional growth or healing or purpose, and a few days later, he brings it up again. He's been thinking about it, turning it over in his mind. That means he values your emotional input. He sees you not only as someone he cares for, but as someone who challenges him to grow. And the only reason he allows that influence is because a part of him has already decided that you matter more than he fully realizes. Love has a way of turning us into students of those we adore. He begins to study your words, your beliefs, your emotional framework, not because he wants to impress you, but because it shapes how he sees himself. Watch how he responds to your own emotional vulnerability. A man who is emotionally connected, even unconsciously, will not shrink away when you open up. He may not always know what to say, but he'll lean in. He'll listen longer. He'll ask follow-up questions. He'll try to understand even if your pain makes him uncomfortable. That's because love pulls him into your emotional experience, and he feels responsible, even if only energetically. He wants you to feel understood because somewhere in his soul, he already knows that your well-being is tied to his peace. One of the most profound signs of emotional openness is when he begins to talk about the future, not in vague, generic terms, but in ways that place you in it. He might not say, I love you, but he'll say things like, one day when we take that trip, or when we move out of the city. He starts envisioning tomorrow with you in mind. And he shares that vision. That's not casual. That's emotional planning. That's a heart already forming attachment and using language to try and make sense of the bond. And here's the final layer. When a man is emotionally opening up before he even realizes he's in love, he will often feel conflicted. He might withdraw briefly or seem uncertain because his logic hasn't caught up with his emotion. He may even say things like, I don't know why I tell you all this, or I don't usually talk like this. But those statements are clues. They are confessions from a heart that is trying to understand itself. Because love isn't always recognized at first glance. Sometimes it whispers in emotional transparency long before it shouts in conscious awareness.